what you're accessing daily. What are the most important things that you're trying to work on? And how do I organize in a way that allows me to focus in exactly on what I need to find immediately and create a very clutter-free digital environment?
Here is my dumping ground of files that I have for my construction project. I'll just, you take the wheel, you tell me what to do or how you want to start it or however you want it to go.
Maybe we create a different folder for that task that's going to be updating multiple projects. And then we create shortcuts to the specific place where those files live in all of the other folders. The beauty of working in a digital environment is we create as many shortcuts as we want so that the file lives in the project folder. It can be found in other places. I don't want you to have a schedule export subfolder that you have to highlight those, drag them into archive, and then go from archive and then put them in the subfolder. I want all the things that you access daily to be at that top level. I don't want you to have a schedule export subfolder that you have to highlight those, drag them into archive, and then go from archive and then put them in the subfolder.
Hi, folks. A quick one before we dive into this week's episode. Our book, The Critical Path Career, How to Advance in Construction and Planning and Scheduling, is out now, and you can order it on Amazon. We'll include a link below. This is a great way to show support for the Beyond Deadlines podcast, and Greg and I have worked extremely hard taking everything we know in our 30 years of experience, plus everything we've picked up from shooting this podcast, and we've tried to pack it into an information-dense book that you can use right away. In the book, we have specific strategies on how to get a raise, how to get a promotion, and find a new job. We include 26 of the best interview questions that we have come across, in addition to 34 specific impact ideas that you can go use on your projects today. We want to thank everyone who's shown us support so far and enjoy this week's episode. Welcome to the Beyond Deadlines podcast, where we tackle challenges that planning and scheduling leaders face on a day-to-day basis. My name is Micah Piippo, and I'm a planning and scheduling manager for Intel.
And I'm Sean Lemon, the digital organizer.
Today's show, we are going to dive into digital organization on the files. Previously, we had Sean on and we talked all about email and we touched on file management. And I feel like this is a critical subject for planners and schedulers. We're inundated with project files, project specifications, schedule updates. And if you have a system that you can leverage to use to organize, it can really benefit your workflows. So Sean, before we dive into, I have a messy folder full of all sorts of files that I've prepared for you today.
Yes.
Before we dive into those, can you just walk me through, some of the high level thoughts on file management?
Yeah. So the highest level would be, we want to focus on what you're accessing daily, and what are the most important things that you're trying to work on. So this isn't about organizing every single file, renaming everything, going through everything in your folder structure, but finding what's relevant for today, and what's going to set me up in the future, and how do I organize in a way that allows me to focus in exactly on what I need to find immediately. And then when I'm finished with something, how do I archive it so I get it out of my view? So we create a very clutter-free digital environment.
Well, I am chomping at the bit to dive right into this and start organizing. Should we just get started? I can walk you through what I got and you can give me the tactics and strategies.
Absolutely. Let's do it.
So here is my, I'll call it dumping ground of files that I have for my, let's call it construction project.
Yep.
So I'll just let you take the wheel. You tell me what to do or how you want to start it or however you want to go.
Okay. So we always have a process that we take our clients through just to have the most efficient way of running through this in getting through big series of files. So this one's pretty small, but we're going to run the same process anyway. And that is starting off by deleting all the stuff that we know we don't need. So first off, Micah, I want you to look through this list. I don't want you to open up a single file. I want you to look at just what you can see by the names. What can we delete? I want you to hold down the control key if you're on Windows or the command key if you're on Mac and click all the things that you know we do not need in this folder.
All right. Well, let's say the vendor coordination plan, don't need it, not relevant anymore. Let's say the process flow diagrams. Yeah, let's just say these two files I know are not needed, not necessary.
Perfect.
So,
Trash them.
boom. I'm feeling better already about my life. Too damn.
Cool. Okay, so now what we want to do is create a new folder and call it archive or anything, whatever makes sense for you that indicates that we're done with this, but we need to keep it.
Awesome. Let me click off of it.
You can just hit the new button at the top left corner.
Oh, that's where it is.
There you go.
That's why they pay you the big bucks. All right.
It's always worse when someone's looking over your shoulder.
Yeah,
okay.
well,
So same process, hold down the control key and start clicking on everything that you know is not relevant right now. We might need to keep it, but
Yeah.
it's, it's just creating clutter and it's not what we need to look at daily.
Okay. So let's say archive. Let's say the charter is an old project file we're not going to need. The template status report. I'm going through some of these files. Progress tracking sheet, we need that. Ooh, we don't need any more templates. We don't need an earned value management template. Cost loading. Schedule kickoff. We've kicked off the project. Probably don't need that anymore. So we don't need any more examples. Probably the site layout. I got that. I understand that. Risk management plan. Yeah, these seem... Probably don't need any more process documentation. Specification, don't think we need. Cool. So I think that's probably a good list of things that aren't needed regularly.
Perfect.
Now, I do have a question. I'll drop these in the archive, then I have another question.
Yep.
That's a little bit more industry focused. So, for example, each month we create a status update report for a schedule and put it out. Now, it doesn't kind of just intuitively make sense to me to put that in an archive file necessarily if I have to go back and reference those files or share those files again, or they're part of a regular workflow. So I guess my question would be, does it make sense to create a subfolder in the archive or to just like have those in, if we go forward in this process, I'm going to create like a schedule update folder that's like a monthly process, and I have an archive in that folder. I know that maybe seem a little bit granular or nitpicky, but it's just one of those questions where I'm like, I think this is maybe where people start to overthink it or trip up on stuff.
Nope, that's where we were going next. So you've just queued it up. So we're trying to get rid of the things that we know. It's like, okay, I'm really not going to access this right away. And now what we're left with are, well, what about the rest of these? So in this case, what I am looking at here is a bunch of schedule exports and then status reports. And so I imagine that the current month, maybe the last 2 months might be the ones that you're looking at most, but you're going to keep exporting more of these documents in here. And so we're going to be adding to this project files folder. And so some of them eventually need to be dropped off. I don't want you to have a schedule export subfolder that you have to highlight those, drag them into archive, and then go from archive and then put them in the subfolder. I'd rather you just have a few other folders in here that are basically the archive. And let me just back up a little bit and say, remember, I want this folder, I want all the things that you access daily to be at that top level. So we may have subfolders for schedule exports and for status reports for older ones, but those are, if you need them, then we can get to them quickly, but we can also archive quickly and just drop them in that folder. But only the relevant files that we're working with right now are going to be at the top level. So that's where I'm wanting you to end up.
That makes a ton of sense.
So now we can create a few more folders if you're ready to do that.
And I know where the button is as well, too. Progress, folks. Here we go. All right. So what should I call this new folder?
So you called the schedule exports something different, and I missed that name, or I don't remember it. So what would you call those documents that are called schedule export and then have may in the year?
Yeah, I would call these, probably let's call it like monthly client reporting.
Okay.
So just to kind of dial you up
Mm-hmm.
on basically a process and scheduling. At the end of the month, you have a construction schedule, you have a construction plan, you've gone through, you've updated the progress and all this stuff, and then you basically send over an email to your client that has a couple different files in it. And so all of your work that month is part of that submission over.
Mm-hmm.
And so to me, that's what I would call it. I'd call it like a monthly client update.
Okay. So is the monthly client update going to consist of these Excel documents, PDFs, and other documents that are in this folder as well?
I would say, let me check out these other documents. I got to remember. So definitely the Excel files, definitely the
Mm-hmm.
status up reports, and I think the change orders are a different. These are a different piece. So I just say it's basically just going to contain the export and the status report.
Okay. So in this case, my question to you is, when you have to go back and occasionally look at historical information, are you going to be looking at both the Excel spreadsheets and the PDFs both at the same time, or any of the change orders? Or are they going to be, yeah, are you looking at them at the same time? Or are you really just going to be referencing an old schedule export?
That's a good question. How about for this one? I'll just be referencing the project status report and the export. I'll probably be going back in. They'll have a specific question about a specific month, and I'll
Okay.
be looking at the report to kind of have the context in it. And
Mm-hmm.
then the Excel spreadsheet has like the all the details in it. So sometimes you can get away with just looking at the report, and other times you go to answer these questions, you got to go all the way into the weeds.
Got it. So my thought is, I would want, what do I want to see here? I would want a folder to archive for these specific things that we would need to look into. And then we would either break up some subfolders inside of that for each one of the year and months, or we change your naming convention, which I would want to change anyway, so that they are categorized by date or by year first, and then by numerical month and and just numerical month, since that's all the detail that we want in here. And then it's going to have a descriptive name of what those files are. The reason why I like to change the naming convention this way is so that I can avoid creating subfolders. I hate having to just double click to try and find what I'm looking for. So,
So walk me through one example.
mhm.
So this one says schedule underscore export underscore April underscore 2024. What would be like your ideal? Let me type
So it'd
that
be
in for the crowd.
2024 underscore
2024
04, and
for an
then
April. Yep.
dash underscore whatever you want, and then whatever the best descriptor is for this file.
Yeah. Let's just call it a schedule export to keep it simple. Okay.
Okay.
And so that helps you sort them faster, find them faster, access them quicker, less amounts of folders that you're going to have to create later to manage that.
That's correct. So every time we put the date first with the year and then 04 for April, we can't just put 4. That's going to organize all of our files chronologically when we're sorting alphabetically, which is our typical sorting mechanism. Every single file platform, no matter what you're using, sorts alphabetically. So it will do it chronologically if we name our files this way. This way, this is very date specific, because your client's going to ask you for some sort of change or what happened during this timeline. So this enables you to very easily see what those or where those files are in a list, and you can just scroll down to that, and that way we just don't have to create a folder for only 2 items. I mean, that just sucks. So
Yeah.
let's just have so let's just have them
Hey,
there.
but we've all been there before, folks. We've all been there.
Yeah.
You've created that folder. The funniest thing I think with digital file management is if you actually picture doing this with like physical files, you
Mm-hmm.
probably never ever do that, right? Because
Right.
one, you only have a set number of files. You got the 30 pack of those manila folder files, right? And you're like, why would I just put 2 pieces of paper in there? But you get on the digital side and you're like, you know what, that sounds like a great idea at the time. All right. Let's talk about what would then the folder be that we would start dumping some of these files in.
Yeah. So they were, you call them schedule updates?
Yeah.
Yeah, so schedule updates. And you could call that archive, whatever. I mean, you'll know since you're the one using them that we're going to move. Well, and you probably don't want to move all of them because you want to leave the one or two that you might need a reference for this month. Like if,
Let's see it. Let's
Mhm.
say, I think I changed the one of them. Let's just say it's August for giggles. And
And
then
then
I'll
you do the
also
same
move
thing.
the status report. We'll say number 5 is the latest. And you know what, folks? I lied. I'm going to say throw change orders in there as well, too, to keep it simple.
Cool.
We'll say that's a client-based reporting type thing.
Okay. So we'll pretend like the rest of these files are the things that you're accessing most frequently around this project. So at this point, we've only got, 10, 12 items in this list. It's very easy to identify what we're looking for here. So why create subfolders? Let's leave them at the top. And then we've got our schedule updates for any of the past schedule updates, whether it's the change orders or anything else. So in order to complete this process, though, we really should rename all of our files. And so this is where the date can really come in handy. And I don't like to overthink the date. So I just recently, right before this podcast, I found a file that's like, you know what, I need to rename that. I forgot to put the date in originally when I put it in the folder. And I wanted to try and remember the exact date that I put it in that folder. And I thought, it doesn't matter. It's maybe a month old. A month difference in the date doesn't really matter. But if it's 2 years old, that's really a big thing. And it's like, okay, I may need to go get an update of this document because it's a contacts list of members of an organization. So obviously that's going to change in 2 years. Is it going to change in a month? That doesn't matter. So that's where don't overthink dates. If you're like, what do I do? Just think, a month matter? Does this amount of time, can you just ballpark it and get it kind of in close enough? So I would want to rename all of these files, and then I would want to go into schedule updates and rename all of those to make sure that they line up. Because go ahead and head into schedule updates real quick. So at this point, all of the Excel files are grouped together, all of the PDFs are grouped together, and and yeah, but they're all based on the name of what that file is, not when they happened. And Micah, you just told me that you look up, or the client asks you based on a date to find that info. So we need all 3 different documents grouped together, whether they're Excel or PDF. So that's why we want to go in and rename these documents to have the correct date. In which case, some of these project status 4, 3, 2, 1, they don't have dates on here. Usually we can look at the last modified date to get an idea of when that was. In this case,
I faked all of these.
Yeah, it's not there because they're all fake. And you're just not going to know because you may have opened up a document and then closed it, and then the date modified gets updated by Excel automatically, and that screws it up. So you may actually need to go in, take a look at the file, close it out, and rename that real quick.
Yeah, it's best practice: year, month for the small months, 04, and then whatever the file name is, and try to maintain that consistency. Because I can already tell, like right here, where we rename that one, where if all of these other ones had been renamed that way, you would have a schedule export, a project status report, and a change order. Boom, boom, boom. That would be my April. Those are all my files. I could quickly go in and find those super fast. So that makes a ton of sense.
Yep. And then we don't have to break them up into subfolders. Now, if this project goes on for years, there's going to be a lot of files in there, and some people just don't like scrolling. It makes them feel out of control and like it's disorganized, even though they're perfectly chronological. If you got 300 files in there, then some people just don't like it, in which case that's fine. You can just create an archive folder right here in schedule updates and choose your cutoff date and say, I'm only going to leave the last year's worth of stuff in here. And then it's just one more click to get there. So that's up to you on how you feel about it. I used to be that way. Now, after doing this so many times and it's really drilled in, why not just have a list?
Yeah.
And I can scroll down and find what I'm looking for this way, unless you exclusively work in Google Docs and it takes a while to load, because you have so many items in there, then maybe you create a subfolder.
Yeah. So let me ask this question as we kind of get closer to the end. There's lots of great tactics in here, folks. But one question I have is, this seems to me like a good workspace, but I feel like there's probably folks out there that if they did this for their entire work, it's probably, like you mentioned earlier, you have clients and other people, it's going to be longer than 10 files, 12 files, and that sort of thing. Yeah. So to me, at what point, when you start to kind of set your table, do you think about, because schedule updates right now is kind of almost like just a very organized, targeted archive file. At what point, when you have all those different workspaces growing and the file list is too large from what you're working on, how do you think about creating a couple extra folders in here? Let's say risk management was a thing that's like a whole program that you're updating and you have lots of files for it there that grow. How do you think about those kind of folder building exercises?
Yeah, I think about it like a workshop. And when I'm building something, so I make pottery. And when I'm making pottery, there are distinct phases, or there's different jobs to do. Now, I may make something with wet clay and then be finished with that and then do some glazing because I have some pieces that have already been fired and they're ready to be glazed. So it's not like I'm only doing one thing all day. I'm typically only doing one thing at a time. But when I'm doing wet work, I have all of those tools available. And then when I'm doing the glazing work, I have all those tools in a different area and they're all set up. So I don't want you thinking about what are necessarily the resources that should all go together. Now, if it's part of a project, I do want all of the files that have to do with that project in one place. But if there's a different type of activity, or once we're going in and doing, some sort of progress tracking, and if there's a lot involved in that, I would want a different folder and then everything kind of set up in there. So I just want context so that when you're doing the job, all of the files that you need to access to get that job done are grouped together.
That makes a ton of sense.
Now, there are some cases where we may be processing, maybe we're processing some sort of updates, and those updates are going to span multiple projects. And so, but we still need to keep all of the project files together, but the process has to do with a lot of different projects all at once. Well, how does that work? Do you go into every single thing, every single project to find what you need, back out of it, go to another one, do what you need from there? Maybe. Or maybe we create a different folder for that task that's going to be updating multiple projects. We create a new folder for that, and then we create shortcuts to the specific place where those files live in all of the other folders. So this is the beauty of working in a digital environment, is we can create shortcuts, and we can create as many shortcuts as we want so that the file lives in the project folder, but it can be found in other places so that you can create these little workspaces that are accessing files that live in different places.
Awesome. That is a super tip right there, folks. That is just, wow. I have lots to think about. Sean, thank you so much for organizing my project folder. I'm much more organized now. Any final thoughts before we jump?
Yeah, I would say don't overcomplicate this. Work on a smaller set of files and figure out kind of what the workflow is. Set it up in one space, make sure it works for you, and then you can move out from there and start incorporating other parts of your folder structure into this if you want to experiment and see how this works. Don't try and overwhelm yourself by doing absolutely everything at once. Kind of take it in bite-sized chunks, but set aside a time to actually get this done, and and you'll make it happen. And I do have a file organization guide that walks you through some of this stuff of our naming conventions and folder structure and the process that we go through that I did today. You can find that at thedigitalorganizer.com/beyonddeadlines.
Yeah, and we'll include a link down below in the show notes. Well, that has been our digital organization for the week. I hope you go out and use some of those tips, tricks, and tactics that Sean gave us, because they are just going to optimize your workflow and you'll get more done in less time. So for us at Beyond Deadlines, have a great week.